Hi, Jacob.
Hello. Seems it's the two of us.
For now, is my audio okay?
Yeah, I can hear you all right. Yeah. Yesterday you were cutting out and it was sounding kind of crazy, but now it's good.
Okay, good. Hi, Mark.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
I can't hear Mark. Can you,
You
Jacob?
can't hear me,
Well,
really? Um,
Okay. Right, I've got a weird audio thing. I think I've worked out what it may be, though, so just try and get rid of that.
you hear me now?
Yeah, I've got you now. I think it's my end, possibly.
Okay. This is my actual.
If you have audio issues with me, please shout, and that's something I can close, which might help. No, it's okay at the moment. All right. Good, good.
Okay. I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a bit choppy though. I think I might
Oh.
close this other application. That's probably me.
Mark, I like your microcontroller.
No, thank you.
Is it a particular one you're fond of, or just something from Google?
No, it's the Zoom background is the greatest invention of this decade because it allows me to work from anywhere.
Uh-huh, yes.
So
I've often taken calls from bed and people comment on how much they like my background. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
it's a headboard. Okay, so now we're gonna give people just a couple of minutes to join. And I wanted to start today by there's something that we need to deal with quite urgently, and that is the work in the CCA on the CCM 4.1 update. It was supposed to be CCM 5. For whatever reason, they rechristened it 4.1. That's fine, but it's so when we were doing our previous revision of CCM, we were limited in that we could not add new control specifications, so could not add new rows to the CCM worksheet. And they have about 190 different control specifications, and one of them would say, well, you have to use appropriate cryptography to protect data at rest and data in transit. But there were no mentions of data in use. Now that they're doing 4.1, we can actually add new control specifications, whereas previously we could only change implementation guidelines under existing control specifications. So the reason this is a matter of some urgency is because of the CCM deadline, where basically by end of September we should propose the changes. By end of October, all the content must be in. And this means, since we're meeting only bi-weekly, this only means that we can meet today and twice in October, and that's that. Any changes we propose would have to be in. And of course, following that, we're going to have a discussion about the proposed changes. And already, so we met with CSA yesterday. We went through and we added a couple of proposed entries, new control specifications. One of them already received feedback from the working group, and the feedback is critical, and it is not incorrectly so. So we should take a look at it, and we should think about it and see how we can respond. So let me share my screen here. And again, I may need to zoom in for you, which would be fine. But let me know, because these worksheets, they have many different columns. So, and I have a big screen, so I need to zoom in there. Happy to do that. So, can you see my screen? And let me know how much you need me to zoom.
can see the screen, but no chance of being able to read the.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the links into chat.
I'll get the link if you want to keep
Yeah,
going
you
with the
have them
discussion.
in the email
Yep.
from Ryan yesterday. Okay.
Yeah, I've got the thing up on my
Yeah.
screen.
All right.
There you
So
go.
I will zoom in, of course. Let me go, but then it's gonna be harder to see all the columns. And again, apologize for that.
Maybe you can
So
hide some of the columns.
like this is a shared screen, so I do not know like if I would be if that's a form of
There it is.
editing.
Hide column. No, just hide it. Oh, I see what you're saying. It might hide it for
might
everybody.
be hiding it for everyone, and I'm a little.
Yeah, no, I got you now. Yep,
That's
understood.
Okay. So what I want to do in short order, we can do this online or offline, but let's see how much we can get through today. I would like to get through the control specifications, but I also want to discuss this as a critical piece of feedback that I think the TAC may also need to hear about, and I cannot, in all honesty, disagree with it. So this is the original control specification, and it talks about provide cryptographic protection to data at rest and in transit using cryptographic libraries certified to approved standards. So this is typical of how standards are written because they cross jurisdiction and they cross technologies. Now, we proposed a new control specification in this control domain, and it has to do with protection of data in use. Now, a couple of things. First of all, it is not required by confidential computing that data in use be protected cryptographically, right? That is really a function of the fact that we page to memory that is off die, right? So there's a CPU, and then over memory bus, you are going to page to DRAM.
In the standard CCC documentation, we talk about isolation and attestation.
Right.
So
And
you keep the exact same words from the technical description.
Yeah, but this means that if we propose data in use, it may not necessarily go into the scriptography and encryption and key management domain because it may have nothing to do with those domains.
Ooh,
For instance,
I see the problem now. Thanks.
right. So on the on an NVIDIA H100, there is no encryption of memory because memory is on die, right? So it's you have to physically attack the motherboard. So so that aside, we may still want to have a new control specification just in a different domain, and that can be discussed. But see what they say. So that's what we proposed for graphic protection, data in use, using trust execution environments. Okay, now we can rephrase this. This was more of a trial balloon language. But then look at what Imran Hans says. And this is the one that I think needs to go in front of TAC ASAP. So he says, I would be cautious on its inclusion due to its maturity level, and he refers to Gartner hype cycle, varied technology implementations, so vendor implementations and hardware dependencies and complexity. And we have had conversations with SaaS vendors exploring the use of confidential computing. I don't know if I'm at liberty to say which ones, but you can imagine major ones, like these very well-known names. And they, some of them reported back that they tried and in fact did give up due to complexity. There was not a smooth sailing. And again, some companies have successfully done it. So Microsoft, Alec, you can speak better to that, has done all the, moved all the credit card processing in Azure to confidential computing. Maybe it's easier if you control all layers of the stack like Microsoft does, right?
And you have hundreds of developers at your disposal.
Yes, and also, so for instance, if we have data that we share with SaaS vendors, and sometimes there is a chain, one SaaS vendor shares the data further with another, and in effect, it's your money, right? You keep it at a bank. We are finding certainly and documenting and dealing with any number of challenges in that domain. So, look, we're not going to solve the response to Imran here. So perhaps Mike, you could probably, talk about how to take something like this to TAC. So we should think about all arguments in both sides and come to a conclusion. Now, if we don't get the control specifications in for point 1, I don't know when the next one is going to be. So, I'm in favor of figuring something out that we can put it in, and we can. So here's some sample arguments from me. One is that there are several well-known regulatory authorities that already mention data and use protection. And we might as well start thinking about that in the cloud. So that's why I believe CSA should still, introduce control specification. Now, also the control matrix, usually lives for a long time. So we can also reference so the hype cycle, Gartner has its own opinions. It's not that they're often always right. Maybe they're sometimes right. So I not necessarily think that it's a hype type of thing. We can reference the speed with which new solutions, vendors, technologies, offerings are becoming available. We can say that you can now rent confidential computing capacity in every CSP, but we need to collect these arguments and present them in a coherent fashion, and we need to do this soon. So with that, I don't think I have much to add on this, but I just wanted to raise this as a legitimate concern from somebody
So
looking at this.
I'm afraid I dropped out because I'm having connection problems. You said something about bringing something to TAC. What are you looking for from me? How can I help?
Specifically, what I'm looking from you is so when we put a recommendation here into the work group, Imran Khan, who is one of the main experts from CSA side, responds with the following: I would be cautious on its inclusion, and that's being data and use protection, due to its maturity level, where he references Gartner hype cycle, varied technology implementations, where vendor implementations and hardware dependencies and complexity. Right. So all of these are legitimate criticisms, but we need to we need to come up with a coherent response from the TAC, and also we need to this probably is not under cryptography because this is an isolation technology. Cryptography is one way of doing isolation, but maybe different control domain would be a better fit. But the response has nothing to do with that. The response is on the grounds of complexity and ease of adoption, etc., which of course is legitimate. Okay.
So I'm not quite sure what's being asked of me, I'm afraid.
I'm asked of you, Mike, as to can you maybe work with me or the SIG to put this concern in front of the TAC so we know how to respond to folks like Imran.
Sure. So I mean, I think basically if you send an email to Dan, CC me, and we'll get on the TAC agenda for next time round. Sounds like the best way forward on that.
Right. Okay. And is the next TAC? It's not tomorrow. Next TAC meeting.
No, I think it's next week.
Yeah, but because we only have until end of October, and because
we need to get a move on. Well, we can put it on that. We can put it on the email list, which may move things along a bit faster. So try that.
Okay. So I will Dan, Mike. I will first email you too, and then we'll figure out how to proceed. But again, we need to move very quickly. All right. So what are the different? So now we're going to scroll down, and I will walk you through the other things that we thought were worthwhile inclusion. So I don't think there was anything under data center security. I don't think there may be something under data security and privacy and lifecycle management. That actually may be a good one, but I don't think we did that yet. Maybe actually data security, privacy and lifecycle management, we may actually be better off under that control domain instead of CEK, right? Because again, it's not cryptography. But also, let's see what other type of considerations they have. They don't. See, this is classification, protection, handling of data, policies, and procedures. So we don't need a control specification if we can simply say we're going to have policies and procedures involving data and use protection. That can go on under implementation guidelines, and I think already has under 4.0. Industry accepted methods for secure disposal, that's probably not interesting. Data inventory, certainly not this. Classification, not this. Data flow documentation, what data is processed, stored, and transmitted where. That's, again, these are diagnostic statements that you do for data asset management and information asset management. Document ownership, stewardship, no. System products, business practices based upon the principle of security by design and industry best practice. Again, implementation guidelines, we don't need a new control specification. Systems, products, business practices based upon the principle of privacy by design. This is a privacy thing. Data protection per assessment. Transfer personal data. So see, I feel we might be covered by this domain without a new control specification, which is probably a less friction getting to where we want. Okay. See, processes, procedures, and technical measures to protect sensitive data throughout its life cycle. That is where we can say, here's a new implementation guideline for you. Do this in addition to what you've been doing. No need for a new control specification, but would cover data in use. So, we may be answering our own question here.
Where did we cover data in use?
So today it's covered because of the 4.0 updates that we've done to implementation guidelines. It will be covered under the implementation guidelines section of the CCM.
Implementation guidelines for which control?
I think it would be for including this one, DSP-17. We need to pull up the, but I believe the one we did the work on implementation guidelines. And this is this section right now, though this process we're doing right now is an ability to revise existing control specifications and create new ones. Implementation guidelines follow after that.
Got it. So let me look at this one here and see. So this spreadsheet doesn't even list the implementation guidelines.
That's a separate, yes, that's going to be a separate document which you can download from CSA, and you can see what implementation guidelines exist through this control ID. And then, when it's time to review those, we may be able to do additional things there. But, I will even say, we should only add what's absolutely necessary. And, save our political capital. Okay, so anyway, so that's DSP-17 is the one that I think covers us without having to introduce a new one. But let's see what else we came up with yesterday. So nothing on GRC, that's fine. Certainly nothing on human resources. Identity and access management, that's a good one. So let's talk about what that means. So let's say we have, let's say we're even covered under, data in use protection. So there's this other drum I've been beating for some time, and that is about introducing a concept of strong code identity. And strong code identity is, as a result of attestation, you should be issued an identity token that only blessed code can have. And then relying parties should be granting or denying access to code based on these credentials. And they should be strongly bound to the workload, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So that's why I've been sort of also beating on the attestation SIG to say you need to understand that relying parties need to remain stable. They cannot deal with things like signed measurements of code. That's not how the real world works. But when it comes to control specifications, we talked about adding some new ones. So here's one that we were thinking about. I'm also going to use their highlighting. Define and implement code access provisioning process, which deals with authorization code updates and other lifecycle events. The reason this was introduced, it was under this one. So under IAM 06, it's a user access provisioning process. And the reason we thought that we might want to introduce a new one is because they have to do one of two things. Either they have to replace user here with security principal, which would probably be my preference, but that's the kind of thing that, you know, we should raise with the IAM group. And otherwise, we need to separate, saying, okay, well, when you deal with users, then you're provisioning, you know, what it is users do. Otherwise, you're dealing with code, and then code access provisioning process will deal with things like code updates. So code gets updated with patches. Users usually move from, I do not know, human resources to accounting to whatever, and they need to be reprovisioned for access. But users don't really get patches. It's not like, you know, this is Alex Fernandez version 4.1, different from yesterday. That's right. So we may, so that's the conversation we're going to have with the IAM group on, you know, which way they want to go. But like over here, see, they talk about things like strong passwords, segregation of duties. All this is very user-centric. And this is where I feel like, you know, if we're going to deal with users as a class with user-specific actions and concerns, then you know, we should probably have a separate control specification with separate implementation guidelines that now will deal with things like the governance patterns we're developing in this group, talking about this is how you manage workloads, this is how you manage updates, this is how you manage attestation services, right? All of that falls, which is very, very different type of activity. Right, managing your code identities than it would be managing user identities. So, so this is where IAM, you know, domain would be a collaboration. And so far, nobody commented on that.
You want to change the control title? Because right now it says user access provisioning. I think it needs to be something different.
Here?
You use the word code. That's as good a word as any, I guess.
Okay, so let's do that. Good observation. So let's keep going. But this is the conversation we will have to have. And you know, it will be a lot easier for me to defend that than it would be to defend introducing something new under data processing, data lifecycle, or cryptography.
I had some questions on that, if now's a good time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked yesterday a little bit about the idea about machine identity, and you know, you've introduced the concept of code identity here.
Yes.
I was wondering, I would advocate for also introducing the concept of device identity. You said that you had some reservations about that yesterday, but we didn't want to deep dive with CSA on the phone. Maybe now's a good time.
We can talk about it. Let me quickly, you know, explain once again for those who weren't on the call with CSA yesterday why I feel the way I do about identity. So I feel that identity compounding, so like user plus device or machine plus code, having tried it before, it's actually very difficult to do. Now, Windows attempts to do it, but I don't think anyone has ever used that platform feature. And really, you know, let's think about the scenarios where machine identity comes into play. You want to say things like, this is a device I recognize, right? That would be a good end user feature. This is one of the devices that belongs to me, and I don't want my code running on devices that don't belong to me or are not registered with me, right? That would be one type of thing. Another one might be, I only want the device that connects to me to be in a certain geographic region, right? So from my German data center, not from my Italian data center. Maybe we come up with others. But in both of those cases, you don't actually, to achieve the scenario, you don't need to compound identity. You don't need to present a device token in addition to a code token. You can say, here's my code, right? This is my, you know, accounting application for my whatever, Middle East region. And then you can also say, it should be connecting from my Israeli data center. That would be an attribute of the code identity, that code runs in this region, code runs on a device I recognize, right? And the relying party just looks at those derived claims and is happy with it, right? So alternatively, if you introduce machine identity separate from code identity, then on the relying party side, you now need to figure out how to deal with multiple authorization tokens.
Yep. And
And that can be a deployment blocker.
so how from an end user perspective, from the gentleman here who's saying, we tried it, it was too complex, we gave up. We're hearing a lot of that. I'd say we're hearing that from the vast majority of third parties. And first party customers, they're converting to confidential computing because leadership says, guys, you're doing this. And but third party customers, it's been a slow road to adoption. I think Google's reporting the same thing during OpenTAC meetings. Reducing complexity, therefore, is becoming easy. So the explanation that you just gave me, I didn't quite follow it. I don't understand the difference between code attributes and machine identity. Try and explain it to me like you would explain it to one of these CSA folks that is objecting to excessive complexity.
So, okay, I don't know. So this is how I would walk you through this. I would say that, say I'm establishing a TLS channel with an endpoint that I'm trying to access. And the endpoint has a certain policy around the kinds of attributes it's looking for in the certificate you present to establish that mutually authenticated TLS channel, for instance. And in that case, there is a certificate that's granted to the workload that would contain the attributes you care about. If you have a separate certificate for your machine issued for machine identity and a separate certificate for your workload given to your workload, then I do not believe the existing protocols easily support multiple authentication tokens, identity tokens, when doing very common things like establishing a secure channel or doing authentication. Usually you present a single identity token, and that's so you also think about the way the attestation service would work. Your dance with the attestation service could be pretty much anything, but at the end of it, and again, which I believe we should be a top line architectural consideration, the attestation service is an identity service ultimately. Maybe it's performing a couple of different functions, like validating measurements against and
reference values,
values and all that. But then it needs to map all of that into something relying parties understand that is extra stable. And you can basically take a look at the certificate, the data center, whatever machine certificate that signed your quote, and from there you can put additional claims into the identity token that's handed to your returned to your workload, right? And then you're issuing a single credential, and in that credential, the stuff about the machine on which the workload runs just becomes attributes of that workload.
But it still establishes the machine identity and can be traced to if you believe the endorsements, then it can be traced to a specific geographic region.
So identity makes some names something. So like in your case, I see your identity presented as Alex Fernandez. That's your identity. And there may be additional attributes of that identity that says, I am connecting from North America. I am an employee of Microsoft Corporation. I am but those things are not identities, they're attributes. There could be many people working for Microsoft, many people connecting from North America, but only one Alex Fernandez. So you're not actually giving me several identity tokens. You're giving me one with a number of attributes.
I mean, that's just the way you're thinking about it. And certainly that's one way to define this topology. But another way, I mean, I could expand that concept to just say you're running Microsoft code and everything else about that is an attribute, right? You're just running Microsoft code and you get one identity token that says you're running Microsoft code and everything else in there is an attribute, or you're connecting to a Microsoft employee and the Microsoft employee has attribute names, or you're connecting to a human on, the planet. I'm trying to break it down into concepts that customers frequently ask me about. One is geographic region. So I'm trying to separate that out into something that people will easily understand. I like the concept of introducing code identity because it's a small nugget that can be explained to people. And I think device identity, and we've even written about device identity in some of these other docs, is a nugget that people can understand, because a device usually has a hardware root of trust, and we talk about disaggregated devices and so forth. So that's kind of why I wanted to, as we're keeping the concepts separate in other documents, I was going to try to tie to those concepts here. So let's do this. Everybody's heard the discussion. Are you just gonna say by fiat as chair of the SIG that we're moving on to the next thing? And if so, that's fine.
No, I'm not pulling rank. You know me better than that. I am simply stating, and my opinion here, which I very much welcome knowledgeable people to challenge, that in my experience, a vast majority of actual conversations with relying parties today, in terms of authentication authorization, involve a single identity token. And that token contains something that's called the primary identity. So like, domain, Active Directory domain, that would be your primary SID. And then it has a bunch of additional attributes, things like your group memberships, right? But if you separate the identity of a machine and give it as one credential, and an identity of the workload, and you give it a separate credential, turns out that real world protocols around authorization and authentication have a hard time dealing with this. And I argue that's, for the scenarios I think of, it's also unnecessary. Now, that's my opinion. I'm not married to this opinion. It can be proven wrong. Tell me that, majority of the protocols allow you to present multiple identity tokens, and the relying parties have no problem structuring policies, authorization policies around multiple identity tokens. And then, I will have been proven wrong, right? So that's a discussion we should be having, and we should be in internal agreement to this group before we go argue for anything in front of CSA.
Makes sense. And there's a lot of stuff that I can't talk about in an open forum. But I can tell you that when you think about things like a containerized workload and a globally distributed cloud infrastructure, for some customers, it very much matters whether that container in a serverless container orchestration environment lands on machine A versus machine B. And we need to be able to explain that concept to customers. And if the terminology that you like, which is there's a single identity token and there's an attribute that describes machine A versus machine B, that's fine. And if it can all be controlled under one control, that's fine too. But then that extra control you added on line 139, why are you singling out code? The concept of code, to me, goes to all kinds of things, which microcode, firmware code, which is controlled by CPU vendors, and then other code that's controlled by operating system vendors, and then some code that can be injected by customers. I see those as one bucket, and then I see the hardware platform where your machine is physically a thing, a chip that resides in a data center in a place separate.
Can I haven't followed all of this. I've been doing some other stuff on the background, for which apologies. But I think there is one type of code which can be different, which is what we've been calling a workload, because it can be attested and therefore bound to hardware. And it's different to the rest of the host or the firmware or the microcode, because it is bound using attestation to a particular instantiation. I'm not sure that helps or muddies the water, but I think that there's a different thing here, ontologically
I think
different.
You're right, Mike. But if we put the word workload in the CCM,
I get that. We can have a tested tested code, something like that, or remotely attested. And so we need to decide whether it's a useful thing to be talking about or not. If it is important that we have it, we need to find a way of describing it. We have a problem with that at the moment. We're trying to go through the TAC generally, but if it's an important distinction that we want to be able to hold on to, then we need to have a way of describing it, I think.
So, Alec, I can speak to what you just said. And everything you said is correct.
Well,
So there is
before
a
we go
wide.
there, let me take a shot at just tabling this discussion. This isn't. I don't want to consume the rest of our time here. We're already at more than half past the hour, and we've got some other things we want to get through in this thing. Does anybody else want to second my motion to include the concept of machine identity? Then let's just move on.
Okay. I will
Well,
also
I'd like to
say.
discuss that separately, Alec. Maybe let's do that another time. I'm happy to do it offline.
So when we talk about here, user access provisioning process, right? This, again, control specifications are very, very short. They're very succinct. They cover a lot of ground. The details are discussed under control specifications, right? So, you know, there is a lot about user access that is similarly complex from, you know, to, you know, code access, right? So for instance, part of your user access may be, you know, how do I know that you're coming from a trusted device or from, you know, trusted network segment or all sorts of things, right? This doesn't go into that. All of that is left for implementation guidelines. Now, and this is because user is usually like a human actor in this kind of context. And I want to remove the overload of actor because the way we deal with human actors is very different from the way we deal with technology, like automated actors, effectively. Right. So when I say code identity, under implementation guidelines, there is a lot of room to cover things like, you know, the code identity may in fact refer to code running on multiple CPUs with, you know, like various aggregation. There's like a lot of more stuff we can say. But if I were to pick a primary driver of the separation of user versus something else, I would pick code over machine instance anytime. Right, there would be multiple workloads on the same hardware, or one work identity spanning multiple pieces of hardware, etc. This is why I'm saying, you know, it's probably for a short, succinct specification. I would say that, and then I would do a lot of elaboration under implementation guidelines. Right, it's not to say that machine identity isn't important. It's more along the lines of, you know, what is it that we lead with?
Totally with you. And you know, there's other concepts up in other control domains that deal with provisioning and deprovisioning machines and so forth. And we can maybe add
So
implementation
how would we just
guidelines
say
there.
workload? And under workload, we can cover a lot more later. Let's not say code because it may actually prove to be a red herring. It's the workload that we care about.
The definition of workload is something that you'll have to introduce to the CSA. I
Yeah.
don't think the term workload,
Yes.
if you were to do a Google search for workload, you would not find the concepts that we're
So
discussing.
one of the things I suggested in the TAC before last was a specific definition of what a workload might be. I wasn't able to make the last TAC, but this is work that the TAC is trying to do and is aware is important for a variety of reasons. Not least
That and CSA has its own glossary, and we have inputs into that. So yes, terms are important. We have a place in CSA to define what a workload is. We should probably synchronize it with how we think about it in the CCC. Okay,
nice.
so let's move on. But this is a good discussion. Let's see what else we thought about adding. This interoperability, portability, infrastructure, virtualization, security. I don't think we could find anything in that domain. I welcome you to review independently, logging, monitoring. Let's see if we thought anything belonged in there. Security incident management, probably not. Supply chain management, maybe something there. I don't think so. Threat vulnerability management. Endpoint management. So that's an interesting one. I thought, okay, here's another one that we thought was potentially interesting. So let's cover this. So we added under endpoint management data and use protection. So protect information from unauthorized disclosure on managed endpoint devices with data and use protection. So what did we say under control specification? Is subject to hardware capabilities. Now, really a lot depends on what you mean by endpoint. So if the endpoint is any device on which data is being processed, so some database, whatever, server in the cloud, then it's more likely that it's going to have confidential computing support. If your endpoint is your desktop or laptop, your phone, it is unclear to what extent we can, at this point, mandate confidential computing, for your Word application, for your Quicken, for this and that. So, I still believe that we should do this. So, for instance, look at UMOA. Protect information from unauthorized disclosure on managed endpoint devices with storage encryption. So we do that today, right? So we protect data at rest on laptops and on mobile devices, but also on servers, right? So data at rest is protected on database servers typically today. Now, should we also talk about protect information from unauthorized disclosure on managed endpoint devices, which is effectively a copy of CAK04. Maybe we should just delete that one and not fight that battle. But the same comment around hype cycle and everything else that comes with adoption of confidential computing should then be copied into this row, because we should still discuss their objections to that. So I wanted to hear the group's thoughts on that.
I agree. You should copy the comments.
I think endpoint confidential computing is too early at this point in time, since the any Intel endpoint is or AMD endpoint is not something that you can protect. I think IoT devices, anything that's running ARM, I think there's lots of places where this makes sense, but I think this one will end up being pretty forward-looking as opposed to what the state of the art is today.
Well, so we're saying control specification subject to hardware capabilities, right? So if you're not capable, we're not going to require it. But this is, again, the question is, where in CCM do we talk about not just manage endpoints as in like the leaf nodes of your network, right? The laptops, the iPhones, whatever. But we will talk about endpoints that are internal to a cloud, to a data center, where similar considerations apply. And if there is a different place in this matrix, in the spreadsheet, where this mention belongs, awesome. But like I'm actually not clear if endpoint means your server. Like here they say
we should ask.
Automatic
let's ask
lock
them.
screen. Yeah.
Let's ask them. I think that's the best.
Okay.
They may have
I'll
a
shoot
particular
them.
view or definition. We should make the most of that.
Yeah. So yeah,
consumer endpoint is this one type of thing, right? As opposed to, you can have server type endpoints as well.
Yeah, and very little is different between them, actually. You think about it. Because they talk about malware, they talk about operating systems, patch levels, but like nothing here is inherently about an endpoint being a end user consumer device. All right, I think that's as far as we've gotten. This is the end of mapping. So we still have 15 minutes left. Any thoughts up until now? That before we switch over.
Do we have other ones to talk about?
The other thing we want to talk about would be the attestation governance pattern. There's still a number of comments in there.
That's fine. Well, let's. I don't mind. I'm not attached to speaking more about this. I'd like to go back to Alex's point, but I think now is probably not the time to do that. So let's move on.
I'm more than happy to, because if it helps us to keep, like, we have 15 minutes, maybe it's better to spend time.
I think part of my issue is that part of my view is quite contentious, and I don't think now's the time to have that. I'd like to fight it out with Alex first, so that we know what the battle points are. So let's do it another time. Sorry.
Okay.
In the nice way possible, Alex. That's fine.
No, anytime.
Yeah, I've sent you an email already.
Thank you.
All right. Let me try and give me a second to pull up the other document here. All right. This is our EVS governance. So what I want to do right now is talk about the comments that we have so far. So one change I made that I would like to seek approval of, I said that the AVS is in the TCB of every workload, and Hank called me out on that. And okay, so technically it's not really in the TCB. So I changed the wording to say that the AVS is the ultimate arbiter of the trustworthiness, which I think is more correct as a statement of why we care to, give AVS governance high priority. So if no objections, I will just accept this change and we can then get into some meat of it. All right, hearing none. So this comment is correct. Also gives me heartburn, the top one. So Hank is basically saying that the RFC RATS does not define the term AVS. And my concern is that the document that's that's targeting people who might want to govern their confidential computing, deployments, and they deal with things like Microsoft Attestation Service or AWS Attestation Service, any one of them. If we are pedantic about using RATS lingo here, it may actually be counterproductive to people reading it, because they don't operate at the same level of RATS terminology. I also
I agree with that, but I think if we don't have if we're not doing that, then we should probably either provide a definition. It doesn't need to be a complex one, or point to one, and I don't think one exists yet. Again, something we're working on the tag.
I like the idea of sticking with RATS terminology. Every time I have a conversation with a customer, it feels like we're speaking different languages. At least there's an RFC that's published on the internet that has a lot of really precise wording that customers can refer to. If we start making up new words that mean ever so slightly different things from what the RATS group is already sort of clearly defined, it's just going to confuse people and
I think that that's
complex.
because RATS is a protocol definition, really. It's not a component and service definition. And at some point we have to, someone, possibly us, needs to do that, or we need a new RFC. And I'm happy for RATS group to do that, and that's something that we've kind of talked about. But it's kind of somewhat orthogonal to what the RATS document, the RFC, is at the moment, I feel.
Well, they've got the term verifier. We're talking about an attestation verification service. We can just say a hypothetical service that performs the role of a verifier as defined in RFC 9334, and boom.
And that I'm pretty happy with. I have to say that's the sort of thing where we can point to something else.
Does that work for you, or did you really want to coin the term attestation verification service and then introduce the world to it?
I don't think I was the one who coined the term. I think it exists out there. I certainly did not come up with it.
It was suggested, I thought, by Hank, in fact, in response to my document. It may have come from elsewhere, but
let's just see
we need the content, we need the phrase, right? And it's starting to be used within the CCC.
I don't feel particularly strongly. I just want us to have a decision that everyone's okay with, because it affects both the title of the document and the language throughout. Because I use AVS here throughout. If we were to go change with something else,
so
that's fine.
Here's my concern. Which
Google's
is that...
funneling me 100% to Microsoft site, so I'm going to try and open a different page and do the same search again.
Here's my concern, which is that one of the reasons that I started doing the work on AVSs and business cases, which then morphed into also technical work, is because there is no good definition. And I would be much, much happier if we felt that we could leave this document until we'd done that work and then point at that work. I'm not sure whether that feels plausible from this SIG's point of view, but it feels like we're missing a whole bunch of definitions and terminology on which this should really land. Now, hopefully that won't take a huge amount of time. I say that we're not always very quick at these things. That is my concern, is that there's work that needs to be done which hasn't been done. I'm pointing at that work. Anyone else?
Let's see.
Is anyone saying something? Because I can't hear anything.
So
if they are.
what I just added a comment that we discussed this. We decided to keep AVS language in place until we decide which way to go, which could be define AVS, go with REST terminology or something else. I think that leaves us basically a record of that. We will come back to this. We're not resolving this comment, and we can move on for now. But then we should still decide what it is that we're going to call this thing.
Love it.
All right, sweet. Okay, so someone was here last 2 weeks ago and said they talked to Mohammed about this one. I'm gonna leave this one alone. It's like he was basically talking about how precise, like what we're gonna do in terms of like, you know, how precise do you want the specification to be, and I'm just like not ready to address this. But let's see. Privacy. And again, there is a Hank comment on this, so I encourage you to like take a quick look. Should we talk about privacy is, you know, as one of properties that AVS needs to deliver?
No, because AVS doesn't provide that. It gives you some primitives which allow you to build privacy. Privacy is something on so. AVS allows you to have assurances around confidentiality, and if you have confidentiality assurances, that allows you to build a something which allows you to have privacy. And I think they're completely different layers in the stack, and what you're building. Privacy is only relevant when you have an individual and an individual's data. Right, and then you can think about binding that data to that individual and unauthorized use, etc., etc. Now, privacy is a kind of a hand wavy thing until you can point at things, and an AVS doesn't provide you those things to point at.
Okay. Should we document what you just said as an out of scope? Because so if you hear. There is a list of considerations that we believe are important subjects of governance. So availability, performance, confidential integrity, a system of record considerations. I believe all three are important. Should we just say privacy is out of scope and explain why?
I would say that confidential computing is a privacy enhancing technology, and that an AVS allows you to do attestation, which is part of what confidential computing requires. That's how I look at it anyway.
I think this might be going back to that that talk that the CCC gave. I can't remember. I think it was at Linux Plumbers, where the requirement of attestation was met with strong objections, because if you provide attestation evidence of your code identity, and there's attributes in there that identify pieces of you, that might be a disclosure of personally identifiable information. And so they basically said, until you have a way to provide anonymous attestation evidence, then we can't require attestation because it violates their privacy guidelines. And so that's an angle that might be the reason he's saying it's one of the
other
considerations. Right, exactly. So I think it is an important consideration, and obviously privacy and security sometimes are in tension, and maybe he's just Thomas is trying to get us to acknowledge that. I think he was one of the presenters that was
yeah, that may be
got
where he's
down.
coming from.
Well, he also talks about just AVS should be responsible for not disclosing, information that could be privacy enhancing. So
Privacy
it's
disclosing, I think you mean, do you? Should not be.
so like the fact that AVS should probably not say anything it's not obliged to say. But or maybe we can table this. Maybe we should take this to attestation SIG and basically say, look, we, for purposes of governance, we need the attestation SIG's input on what privacy governance looks like. I mean, we don't need to decide this here. We just need to document what the best practices are. In some cases, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt what they are. But in this case, it may be something that we just need others to chime in. And I am perfectly fine to put this on attestation SIG, roster of topics.
That's okay.
Okay. Well,
Looks like we're moving quite a lot of this out to other places, which I'm fine with, but I think we just need to, acknowledge that.
perhaps you're right, but also this is something that we are, solicited feedback from the attestation SIG on. This is the feedback we got, and maybe we're not equipped to make a decision here, but they are. In which case,
no, good call. Good call.
Right?
Let's do that.
Let's you gave us this feedback. We're following up. Tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. So I will then reply and say, and I will follow up and email the attestation SIG and say we would like to have a conversation on the privacy governance. Here we talked about history of governance of policies, history of reference values and endorsement received from the supply chain. So we haven't really done this other thing, is synchronizing the terminology here. Like, what do we mean by policies, right? So like I mentioned, things like attestation policies, policy related to administration of stuff. So maybe attestation policy should in fact be these other things, endorsements and all this other stuff. In which case, it's really a matter of let's actually define, maybe in RAT's language, maybe in, like, it's the same thing as AVS. Like, do we mention AVS or do we mention something else? But we should be unambiguous about what, how this relates to what attestation group works on and RAT's works on.
Again, this is work that we know we need to do, but hasn't happened yet. I need to go. I've got another meeting coming up, I'm afraid. This has been useful and fun, and
all right.
frustrating in equal measure.
We'll reconvene in 2 weeks, and I will comment on this comment, basically saying again, we'll need to synchronize terminology with the attestation SIG. So we're going to keep that in flight for now.
Thanks, folks.
All right. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Great.
See you next time. Bye-bye.